Hello, and welcome to an adventure like no other. Far more than what you have known, there is something far more to be known than you can ever know. And it is all about you, the real you, your real awareness with your intuitive senses. You were never taught that the real you, your real awareness, is operating 5 bodies in cause and effect, restricting creation. You have been taught to think that you are only a one-dimensional human person, with a mind and emotions, and with a very short lifespan on this planet Earth. More than what your mind can grasp is your intuitive senses that can be opened to see beyond all your restrictions. You have always had an opening to see beyond what you have known, and this has been purposely kept from you, and this is where you have heard rumors and stories about your nightly dreams. Your so-called dreams is your opening to your intuitive senses that will allow you, the personal you, to excel beyond what you have previously known. Everyone has intuitive senses, and very few people take advantage of what is possible by recognizing something more than their mind can understand. Creation has its place for all of us, and then there is all life, which is far more than anything than what can become with creation. Everything we experience is necessary for us to survive with whatever we choose and decide our life to be. New Kevin Smith is the great witness to something more than what can be taught and learned in any school. It can be so that when anyone first listens to Kevin's intuitive side experiences, also known as real side experiences, from what their personal mind has known, Kevin's manner of expression will at first be rather different to comprehend. This is where this introduction and reading the new books and Facebook groups will help. Have fun deciding. DUANE the Great Writer and Seer.
Every idea we create will instantly be its manifestation in isness reality terms, and will feature on the real side where it can be revealed for all to see. The ideas we create, or those as created by others we then agree with, will take the moments they will to process through to the physical, as the mechanics of consciousness design dictate that through the inception of additional time and space ideas, an idea is not instantly its effects as it is in actuality, but will take the moments it will to become so on the physical. I can instantly manifest a car the moment I create the idea on the real side, but as it has been decided through a consciousness, so a certain duration of illusory time must elapse to allow for certain steps required that a car become so, where in reality there's no reason why consciousness agreements couldn't dictate a car's instant manifestation. Just as it is with computer gamers, some gamers you need to build your vehicles, gather the materials, etc. Other gamers you simply click the car icon and it appears. Different programs affecting different circumstances, just as a variation in species consciousnesses dictate variation in the overall experience of the species, the limitations, etc. And although the delay factor of the physical level manifestation of instant idea effects may differ between species in regards to how swiftly the effects follow the causes, generally this will be the case with all individuals and species who are animating a physical level body form that decodes the ideas of consciousness into a simulated effect, but in this gradual processing rolling out away. As everything is its effects, destructive idea creations will implode by virtue of their nature. In a way, every idea is restricting, as the cause and effect principle applies, and as the idea agreements compound, so the personal self eventually implodes. under the sheer weight of the agreements continuously added to in the consciousness, and this expresses on a simulator scale also, with the simulators going through their degradation cycles to eventual implosion, as effected from the overall consciousness, which becomes overburdened with restricting ideas held to. As individuals' ideas may be destructive of not only themselves, the creator of them, but of others, as they also agree with these ideas, but the new friends can be deployed to dismantle these ideas on the real side, before they can be agreed with and effect their destructive or restricting natures. This isn't a violation of every individual's free will right to create what they will, but rather than let the ideas impact destructively as they might, alternatively can the effects be managed, effects in equal measure to the implosion that the destructive idea actually is, that we can neutralize the ideas, and this can present in various ways on the real side. As an experience I shared previously and recently involved disabling the power supply to a dark force building, representing the rendering powerless of a dark force created idea before it could be potentially agreed with and cause the damage it might. In this real side experience, I would find myself in the company of my brother Gary, though impressions suggested this was a real guide assuming his form, the guides often adopting the outer forms of parental figures and older siblings as they will. We were operating within a street setting, and from a distance so would be standing a mother and a child. Symbolically, on the real side, a mother carrying a yet-to-be-birthed baby represents the creation of an idea, although all according to context. It follows then that a mother with a child now liberated from her womb is the idea maintained and made more prominent. And as I mentioned earlier, very often new friends will be deployed to dismantle ill-intended ideas before they can cause their damage, as an alternative effect to the idea self-imploding with all those who had agreed with it, and this would be a similar representation. The female appeared human, but her idea creation, now as a child, was of such a potentially destructive nature, if allowed to be maintained, that it could have far-reaching and devastating simulator consequences, as impressions suggested. She herself, the one who had conceived the idea, was of a very dark and controlling inclination also, though nothing regarding the specifics of this idea were forthcoming, only its destructive potentiality. As the effects could be managed, as we could effectively dismantle this idea, this would take the form of visually taking the baby from her and dissolving it effectively. The guide desired that I do this, but in this case, although I could see through the simulated front to what it represented, my personal self would as though prevent my dismantling of the idea, due to how it visually appeared, that of taking a mother's baby. The sense was that this may present as two viewpoints, that perhaps this was a test of my ability of indifference in the face of whatever simulated situation I am presented with. Not that we do as we please and be as abusive as we like, as there are cause and effect consequences for all actions, but that we see everything as the simulated unreal ideas that they are, and we simply then are making choices and bearing the effects, as opposed to categorizing everything as good or bad and choosing our actions based on where on the polarity scales we position ourselves. We more so learn to see all ideas as the fabrications they are, everything simulated as comparisons to recognize the is from. But secondly was that the creator of the idea had as though presented her destructive idea in this way that others are reluctant to dismantle it, through how it visually appeared, that even were it an actual child, which it wasn't, even Adolf Hitler was undoubtedly an adorable baby at one point, and the next a murderous tyrant, as though she was aware that her idea was a candidate for dismantling, and so this was an obfuscating surface simulation method to as though protect the idea, to allow it the moments it needed to glean the agreement required that effected could be its destructive essence. Usually the real awareness orchestrates proceedings. The personal self just sits back and observes what's taking place with the experience inserted body forms, but it can come to the fore and present as an interfering factor, thinking it knows better than life, better than the everything oversight of the real awareness, and can sabotage certain situations accordingly, even if its intentions were sincere. Either way, the guide simply patted me on the shoulder and seized the baby, the idea, himself, and promptly vanished with it, the idea set to be dismantled and released to the ears. And so really the guide could have done this himself, but perhaps it was a test of indifference, of my ability to take action with what makes sense with life. But even as I could see through the surface front and recognize what it actually represented, the personal self would put on the brakes in this case. The female whose idea it was would descend into a terrible rage, the kind of reaction you would indeed expect from one having their ill-intended agenda derailed than from being deprived from an actual child, and unable to vent her ire on the guide, she would turn on me, and attempt to assail me with unbridled fury, more akin to a wild animal than a human. I would simply withdraw from her presence, relocating to another scene beyond her reach, as opposed to bothering to fend off her frenzied attacks, as all simulated situations, and including other body types, are effected from ideas, as all simulated situations, and including other body types, are effected from ideas, and we have but to release the ideas, and we are removed from such scenes, as was the case here. I would never have revealed to me the nature of the destructive idea now dismantled, but was a little personal self disillusioned that I was unable to carry it out myself, being a personal self swayed by the protective surface simulation measure the ill-intended female, whomever it was, had exacted that her idea could perpetuate. For now I found myself in my physical level former UK house recreated, and on the real side the recreated houses tend represent the consciousness. Anything occurring within the houses will reveal idea agreements and attachments present in the consciousness therefore, and on previous real side experiences have I shared how as we align more so the consciousness personal self with the real intent for is recognition, this can express on the real side as making alterations to our recreated houses, everything from decluttering to restructuring. In this case, I was on the top floor of my house, representing the unseen other dimensions of life, and was removing a selection of books from a bookcase with the intentions of throwing them out with the trash. Books are a common real-side representation of ideas. The consciousness can be akin to a library of books, where we may select that which we require, but the idea being to return then the books to the shelf, to not carry the ideas around with us, for we don't destroy the consciousness we have created, we just become ever more so indifferent to it, only utilizing the references all experiences present as, where needed. We may frequently remove books, ideas from the consciousness, as though sifting through outdated ideas and discarding them, that we no longer even utilize them as references, as they perhaps no longer serve any worth, other than as comparison to recognize the is by. For a new friend once shared an experience where the books of Paul Twitchell would fall upon him, revealing how the ideas were valid for the time, but life has moved on and everything now is new, and about the recognition of the is. We no longer are miring ourselves in literal references. And this I was now doing, removing outdated idea-representing books, that perhaps that which they were, certain considerations, notions, etc., were responsible for my inability to act as I should have in the previous scene, that the removal of these ideas, the discarding of them, may better facilitate my ability to be indifferent, that my personal self be less inclined to step in and interfere under certain simulation-triggered circumstances. Although at that moment an individual in the current role of one of my family members would manifest and express their dismay at my removing of these ideas. For the personal self does adore its comforts and routines, that which is familiar, including the individuals in its experiences that it will seek to retain, even the way other individuals are, their attitudes and created personalities will present as familiar comfort zones to the personal self. Unsurprisingly then, how family members and friends, those disinclined to pursue their own processes of awareness, will loathe that we are doing so, as to take on such a process is a gradual disassociation from all ideas of creation. We will be operating in ways that make more sense with life, and less in the ways we once did, when we were immersed as the personal self, that our friends and family may wish us to remain as. And we then are somewhat affording them discomfort, as we are presenting now as that which they are unfamiliar with, and they will seek to draw us back in, that their little bubbles of comfort affording unreality, including all those that once were sharing their bubble, are retained exactly as they always have been. This would be expressed here with this particular family member attempting to discourage me and condone my consciousness restructuring. A restructuring that was seemingly necessary, as the refining of the personal self is a constant as we proceed with our journeys of is recognition. Despite the family members' protestations, I would proceed, and as my book removing was satisfactory, certain ideas discarded, I would fade from the scene of my recreated physical level house. I now found myself in a large college-style building, and I have been revealing on many real side experiences the presence of universities, whether providing of real education and real references pertaining to the ears is a constant, that through the intent set with the ears, so this effects as individuals able to feature in such other dimensional positions a continued support structure for all body types on their respective processes of awareness. I would be attending a number of classes, and this generally represents our ongoing awareness processes, as though graduating through tiers of schooling, and accompanying me would be a former school associate called Keith. The real guides not only will assume the outer forms of my grandparents and older brother, but occasionally Keith's form also, as real awareness impressions will always determine, and was indeed the case here. My lessons, my ongoing awareness process, were over for the moment. Keith, the guide, had been sitting beside me in the classes throughout, and now we would both proceed to wind our ways along a number of corridors of the real side university. I have also mentioned on previous real side experiences that the universities also serve as a basis of operations, where various assignments are launched from, and it was as though, as we proceeded down the corridors, we would shift through dimensions and find ourselves in a mechanical environment, a series of interconnected chambers that continued on from where we had entered. As I followed Keith, the guide, seems we were to traverse through these chambers to whatever awaited us, where they finally would terminate. Interestingly, there were two opposing groups of what appeared to be humans, operating in the mechanical structure we were working our way through. Impressions revealed neither group were Dark Force affiliated, however, all were consciousness, personal self immersed, and were somehow resigned to this curious environment. As everything we experience is through agreements we have that effect such to be, so these two human groups had effected for themselves circumstances in which they were positioned in this somewhat limited mechanical spot, and had the inclination to continuously be battling each other, each group's objective to ultimately destroy the other. They seemed to have all they required to exist in the curious mechanized position they were in, and impressions suggested it was as though a kind of computer game creation, presumably by the hand of whatever lay at the end of the series of chambers we were traversing through, that we intended to engage with. As we all are the effects of ourselves, that which claims our focus and attention will manifest its nature on the real side, and if maintained, become as potential physical level future lifetime projected positioning also, and the sense was as though that these groups of humans were those whose physical level indulgences included the computer games the controllers provide humanity. Games and entertainments not quite as innocent as they seem on the surface, but in reality portals and actual created dimensional positions where individuals may find themselves projected into, as it was with these two opposing groups of humans. A creation overseen by whomever it was the guide and myself were to engage with, a being of some description whose creation was intrinsically linked to the very computer gamers as a Dark Force provided, just another expression then of control, as all Dark Force created ideas will be, if agreed with. The guide and I wouldn't initially have any contact with the warring human factions, just the impressions of their presence and their inclinations towards each other and the nature of the environment they were in. But at a certain point, I passed through a metallic archway that connected to another section and was surrounded by members of one of the groups of humans. Seems they recognized me, and according to them, they had captured the leader of the opposing group, as they held me at gunpoint. I was assuming my usual human Kevin form, and so this wasn't a case of mistaken identity, as it may be if I was perhaps in an alternative outer body form, as I have a tendency to be on the real side. In my younger years, I very much was a heavy gamer also, and the kind of computer game that's nature was of battling, competition, etc. As the dark forces do delight in ingraining this idea and attitude into the consciousness of all their slaves, that it was altogether possible that just as it was with the humans in this mechanical environment, I may have been completely oblivious of how the computer games I once indulged in would have affected in this way, as positioning in these other dimensional game-like situations. That perhaps I was indeed in the role of the leader of the opposing side at one time, and as the battle between these humans seemed endless, that the leaders of each naturally were the most protected, very likely that this group that represented one of the human groups may not have seen the leader of the opposing side for who knows how long, and even as I had very likely relinquished this position as one of the endless expression effects of the consciousness of agreements, as we all are multi-dimensional, and until we get a handle on the entirety of the focus of the personal self, aspects of it will be living all manner of other dimensional lives and situations. This group, the opposing side, may have recognized me from the time where an aspect of my created self was in participation, and assumed I still was. Pleased were they that the leader had blundered recklessly into their midst alone. The guide, however, would be aware, of course, of this situation also. The impressions I had afforded as to the explanation for my predicament, and perhaps this was also what I had been doing in my recreated house, that the releasing of outdated ideas could have been in relation to this situation also, that maybe an aspect of my created self still was a part of this opposing group's nonsense, and only now had it been determined, faced and released. Regardless, the guide would as though wave his hand and render the group of humans as though momentarily dormant, allowing us to continue on unmolested, our intention maintained to reach the end of this mechanical environment, and for whatever purpose we had, with whatever was the creator of this idea, that the humans, through their physical level computer game infatuation, had effected themselves into. The experience would end at this point, however, and perhaps will continue at a later moment, but the personal self is not always shown all the particulars, as sometimes details are omitted that the ever-watching dark forces are not privy to that which they could use for their controlling desires. For everything that enters the personal arena, that which we are shown on the real side, all others in creation can potentially see also. The dark forces constantly monitoring our physical and real side simulated activities as they do.